If there's anything in gaming culture that's more repulsive to the ear of a gamer than games as a service, it's probably DLC. With the ever-growing presence of microtransactions, gamers have become quite hesitant to have any faith in post-launch content with a buy-in fee. Even if there's no price attached to it, there's still this perception that when a developer releases a day one patch or a series of patches, the game's seen as unfinished and rushed out. But what if I told you that sometimes, DLC is actually a good thing? Yes, you'd prefer an experience that doesn't require a designated wait time before it reaches its potential. But when it comes to making a satisfactory experience, DLC can be a necessary means to an end. Not only that, but they can actually make the entire game better, which is a worthy thing when the game especially needs it. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 10 times DLC saved broken video games. Number 10. Fallout 4 Far Harbor. The toughest thing that Fallout 4 had to deal with was the titles that came before it. Fallout 3 in New Vegas had a great sense of depth and openness in how each playthrough would transpire. Fallout 4, in comparison, completely faltered when examined under a microscope, and Todd Howard himself has admitted some of its flaws, including the dialogue system. Worst of all, the game simply lacked a ton of intrigue and super interesting locations, with all too few exceptions. However, through the majesty that was Fallout 4's pricey season pass, we got the exceptional Far Harbor. From My Alert Queens to the simply awesome harpoon guns, the entirety of the Far Harbor map was full of intriguing concepts and secrets to uncover. All of this while having its own standalone plotline that keeps you interested throughout, without ever straying your focus with side activities. It served as a great representation of Bethesda Game Studios at its post-apocalyptic best. Darkly comic tone, inventive missions, all within an environment that feels delightfully fresh. If only the entire game maintained the same level of inspiration and creativity. Number 9. ASURA'S Wrath, the true ending. One could argue that the most important part of a story is its conclusion, especially in a video game when you've spent hours upon hours getting to that point. A good ending can really set apart a game that's okay from a game that's really great. The story in ASURA'S Wrath is undoubtedly its focus, combining its primarily narrative-driven structure with epic over-the-top action sequences distributed throughout. It plays out like a God of War game if Telltale had got their hands on it. Thankfully, ASURA'S Wrath tells an engaging, thoroughly entertaining story that embraces the sheer lunacy of anime without losing the heart and soul of the genre's best qualities. Yet even with all of that, there was one massive game-breaking problem that invalidates ASURA'S Wrath as a complete experience. The ending came in the form of paid DLC. Capcom, not content with you having paid full price for a game, decided to hold out on fans and charge them $7 for the ending. On one note, the ending did provide a satisfying conclusion, but it's deeply upsetting that a publisher would pull something like this. It may have been the vital missing piece that saved the game from being incomplete, but it ultimately felt like Capcom just broke off the final piece of the puzzle and charged you for it. Number 8. Street Fighter V, Post-Launch Fighters and Campaign. A fighting game is only as good as its roster. If you don't have an interesting roster, a meaty single-player campaign can salvage it. Well, Street Fighter V launched with no such thing, and it lacked a number of fighters to choose from. Our friends at Capcom struck again with this obviously unfinished product that did promise to provide free content drops in the future, but was still released at full price without hesitation. What followed a disappointing release was Street Fighter V, over the course of several years, becoming a rather impressive fighting title that was more than worth the money, with 19 characters added over the course of 4 seasons, several new modes, and a significant amount of work done towards improving servers. When all post-launch content was released, the weaknesses were all but remedied, and PlayStation players had a notable exclusive. Although original buyers of the game resembled investors rather than proud owners, SF5 finally earned its place alongside other fighters like Injustice 2 and the recent Mortal Kombat titles. SF5's post-launch content certainly gave the game a necessary glow-up. That said, the less we say about the in-game advertising they added in late 2018, the better. Number 7. Ghost Recon Wildlands, Fallen Ghosts. Ghost Recon Wildlands had plenty of potential, but what it had in player freedom and open-ended missions, it lacked an especially engaging subject matter and characters in the story. Moment-to-moment gameplay also wasn't particularly thrilling, lacking a lot of tension and intrigue outside of the developer-planned action. Ultimately, it was yearning for that necessary tension to keep things interesting in an otherwise somewhat dull world. Well, thanks to the Fallen Ghost DLC, that issue has been remedied significantly. Rather than going around the map and just hunting down cartel members, you're placed in an unknown territory and your team is being hunted. This massive shift in power dynamics gives the game something unique from what other titles like Ghost Recon Wildlands offer. You finally feel that appropriate sense of tension from venturing further into the campaign. Most importantly, it helped make the game feel even closer to the spirit of the series. It's too bad that the original base game didn't quite have that sparkle that Fallen Ghosts had, but at least we got Fallen Ghosts out of it. Number 6, Elder Scrolls Online, Morrowind. It's difficult to say how disappointing Elder Scrolls Online was at release. While some standard growing pains regarding online play were expected, it was the content within the game that ended up tarnishing the experience. It had replicated the Elder Scrolls theme, certainly maintaining the appearance of the series. However, repetitive missions, microtransactions that made progression painfully gradual, and a general lack of creativity and inspiration in its story and characters created a husk of what Elder Scrolls games are supposed to be. Clearly, developers ZeniMax Online Studios decided to dig back in and find out exactly what was missing and what players needed to see. Well, judging by the method they chose and the now solid state of the game, it seems that the go-to move was to embrace the series' roots. A couple of content DLCs came and went, but it was the Morrowind expansion that gave skeptics a notable reason to give the game a shot. Significantly more activities to take part in, interesting and familiar locales to peruse, all things that fans have been clamoring for. It added depth to the game and gave ESO some of its lacking identity back. The addition of Somerset and future Elsewhere expansions are certainly also going to help matters, but it was Morrowind that really kicked it off and revitalized this dying MMO. Number 5, Star Wars Battlefront 2, Clone Wars. Battlefront 2, the game that was both undone and saved thanks to its marked lack of paid DLC. It's what led to an intensified backlash from fans following their experiences with the microtransaction-riddled progression system. There may not have been any season pass, but with a game whose core systems were broken at their very foundation due to greed, it wasn't much consolation. All that fans had left was promised improvements and free content drops. Well, as it turns out, those free DLC drops promised prior to release were exactly what the doctor ordered. Fans wanted to see their favorite characters and memorable movie vistas brought to life, but it wasn't quite clear how developer DICE would go about doing so. Thankfully, in an effort to remedy the extreme damage done by the project's initial state, they've gone out of their way to ensure those regular free content drops were full of fan service and nostalgia, with their Clone Wars DLC being the greatest standout of the bunch. It took the greatest qualities of the film and brought them to playable life with gusto. Star Wars Battlefront 2 is no longer the game it once was. It became something far greater, and it's thanks to DLC like this. Number 4, Sea of Thieves. All of it. The initial Sea of Thieves release only further encapsulates the issues with games as a service. That label only ends up being used as an excuse to release unfinished but still full-priced products, and Sea of Thieves was no exception. It was an excellent foundation with not much of anything to accompany it. A pirate crew that you can assemble yourself and a beautiful world to behold, but no true destination to set sail towards. Put simply, the game really needed more meat on its bones, and that meat has been gradually provided over the course of several free content drops. To give Rare and Microsoft credit, those free content drops have absolutely turned things around for Sea of Thieves. The game isn't just aimless sailing and goofing around with friends, and it finally has some personality beyond just the quirky art design through its cutscenes and outgoing characters. While it would have been far more beneficial to Microsoft and everyone involved if they just delayed the title so they could have launched it with this extra content, improvement is appreciated no matter when it happens. Sea of Thieves is now notably far and away better than it was when it released, and it's thanks to DLC, yet again. Number 3, Mass Effect 3, Extended Cut. Mass Effect 3's ending. What else is there to be said about it? I mean, it was the culmination of over 100 hours of gameplay, story, and character development, but ended up being a disappointingly one-note closer that didn't take anything you had done into consideration, going against everything BioWare promised. The trilogy's triumphant conclusion really just came down to this unsatisfying ending, putting off anybody from wanting to replay it. Thankfully, BioWare was willing to make it right and save this game from being a permanent sore spot. While ME3's Citadel DLC is a worthy entry here, as it's a goofy, delightful experience full of fan service and heart, the extended cut tends to the festering wound that was the game's original ending. Instead of simply ending with an ambiguous cliffhanger, players are given explanations, context, and closure. Your actions throughout the series are recognized and summarized, and you get a narration that's specific to the ending you chose, giving you a clear idea on what your final decision led to. Best of all, they didn't charge a dime for it. Finally, the fans were listened to, and we got that satisfying conclusion that we asked for. Number 2, No Man's Sky. Next. When all is said and done, No Man's Sky never had a chance. Sean Murray consistently promising far more than his team could provide in the time before release, and the insurmountable hype surrounding the project ultimately led to a massive disappointment. That said, it's not like No Man's Sky didn't have it coming. Gameplay was a grind-centric bore, and the planets were far from the unpredictable adventures that they were promoted to be. No multiplayer to remedy the dullness, and no real story to speak of had many thinking this one was dead in the water. Yet Hello Games persevered and kept the fixes coming. Little fixes became big patches, and those big patches snowballed to make the new No Man's Sky that players have today. Rebranded No Man's Sky Next, this version of the game comes packed with so many updates and additions that it has revitalized it entirely. Each world is more vibrant and comes packed with more activities, moment-to-moment gameplay is significantly less dull, and all of it is now playable with friends. Players were certainly burned by the original release of No Man's Sky, but the state it's in today definitely deserves your attention, especially if you passed it by. Number 1, Destiny: The Taken King. Vanilla Destiny was the equivalent of a $60 Trojan horse. Developed by Bungie and maintaining the appearance of something truly superb, it ended up being a trap. Activision took advantage of player trust and shipped out a game lacking almost any story, no real memorable characters, and gameplay that was a repetitive slog. Hyped to be gaming's next biggest franchise, everyone bought in and felt conned by this impressive looking title that ended up being entirely hollow on the inside. Even after the game's first 2 expansions, nothing about the title felt entirely noteworthy. Then when all seemed lost, with all in this case meaning everybody's money, Bungie pushed out one more expansion, The Taken King. Just like that, Destiny pulled in so many who had promptly quit it long before. A prominent storyline, character-driven cutscenes, and appreciated fixes to UI, mission structure, and gameplay was exactly what the Doctor ordered. Everything that vanilla Destiny lacked, The Taken King had. Players had a reason to be excited about this franchise again. Best of all, it's because of The Taken King that Destiny 2 had so many noticeable improvements over its predecessor. For all the money initial investors got cheated out of with this game, The Taken King was more than worth the price of admission. And that is our list. Do let me know down in that comment box if you can think of any other times that DLC saved broken games. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. You can come say hi to me on my Twitter account if you want, where I'm @JessMcDonald, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more great content.